Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker.
Alright everyone, welcome to episode 113 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. Today we have a special guest, Andrew Klim, Japan-based accomplished video game translator, localization expert, and video game music DJ.
On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and other random garbage.
To get us started, here are this week's top news highlights.
Ex-JOC Chief Takeda questioned over Tokyo Olympics corruption case.
Tokyo doctor accused of forging COVID vaccine documents says he injected saline solution into patients.
Tokyo police mistakenly arrest man pushing motorbike on suspicion of drunk riding. This week in Japan.
All right, here's our first news item this week. Ex-JOC Chief Takeda questioned over Tokyo Olympics corruption case.
Kyodo News has reported that former Japanese Olympic Committee President Tsunekazu Takeda, who served as a vice chairman of the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics Organizing Committee, has been questioned by prosecutors on a voluntary basis over an expanding sponsorship bribery scandal.
Takeda, 74 years old, is believed to have been questioned as a witness. Prosecutors are seeking to establish a bribery case against Haruyuki Takahashi, a former executive of the organizing committee, who allegedly received money from two companies in return for helping them to be selected as sponsors of the Summer Games last year.
So as of right now, we don't know how much though, right?
We know the amounts. It's, I think it was over $500,000 US each.
Ah, interesting.
He made some money.
Yep.
And now he's in the slammer.
Alright, and up next, Tokyo doctor accused of forging COVID vaccine documents says he injected saline solution.
The Mainichi has reported that a doctor arrested on suspicion of defrauding a local government of commission payments for COVID-19 vaccinations told police he gave saline solution shots to those who came to him for inoculations.
Takenori Funaki, director of Oji Kitaguchi Medical Clinic in Tokyo's Kita Ward, was recently arrested by the Metropolitan Police Department. The 51-year-old is said to have been against COVID-19 shots, and the NPD's second investigation division is carefully looking into the case on the assumption that he gave saline solution shots while claiming they were coronavirus vaccines. Yikes.
The doctor is accused of forging pre-vaccination screening questionnaires for a Sapporo resident in her 50s and her two children who actually had not been vaccinated, and defrauding the Sapporo municipal government of some 14,000 yen, which is about $100 US, in commission payments between October and December of 2021.
The woman who is against vaccines is believed to have asked Funaki to forge the vaccine certificates for her children and herself. However, there were reportedly others who came to the clinic to actually be inoculated.
Funaki told investigators, "I was asked by many people and forged vaccine certificates to look like they got vaccination. I explained the danger of vaccines to those who wished to get the shot, and if they still wanted it, I injected them with the saline solution."
In January, the public health center in Tokyo's Kita Ward was consulted by locals who got inoculated at the clinic, complaining they, quote, got vaccinated but have low antibody titer, and possibly were injected with saline solution. As of now, none of them have suffered from health damage. According to public experts, saline solution shots are unlikely to adversely affect people's health.
Alright, and up next, Tokyo police mistakenly arrest man pushing motorbike on suspicion of drunk riding.
The Mainichi has reported that a man who was pushing a motorcycle in the capital was mistakenly arrested for drunk riding on September 12th.
The Metropolitan Police Department's Takashima Daira police station temporarily arrested a corporate employee in his 30s who lives in the Saitama prefecture city of Wako on suspicion of violating the Road Traffic Act.
According to the Traffic and General Affairs Division, police arrested the man on the spot for allegedly rear-ending a parked taxi in Tokyo's Itabashi ward on the night of September 12th. While alcohol was detected on the man's breath, he reportedly told police, quote, "I didn't do anything."
Later, the taxi's dashcam footage proved that the man had actually been pushing the motorbike. Police released the man at 10 a.m. the following day, as people are considered pedestrians under such situations and not subject to drunk riding laws.
An official at the Traffic and General Affairs Division said, "We apologize to the man. We will instruct our police officers more thoroughly to prevent a reoccurrence."
Oh, he was doing the right thing, and he still got arrested.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes even good people get arrested.
Those cops.
All right, and up next, we have a special interview with Andrew Klim, Japan-based accomplished video game translator, localization expert, and video game music DJ.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Tokyo Wave.
Originally from Oshkosh, Wisconsin in the United States, Andrew is a gamer and Japan enthusiast, all the way back from the age of 5, starting out with Dragon Quest I and the first Zelda.
Andrew's first love was music, and he initially went to university for percussion performance and sound engineering, but was forced out due to severe wrist injuries. He then switched to English composition and creative writing at the request of professors who felt he had a talent as a writer.
Andrew moved to Japan in 2005 and participated in the JET program for 3 years, then did 2 years of private work as an English teacher before passing JLPT1, the highest level of the Japanese language proficiency test, and moving on to freelance translation. Slowly transitioning from general translation into games almost exclusively, Andrew has since contributed to hundreds of games of all genres, including Final Fantasy, Shenmue, hell yeah, One Piece, Attack on Titan, and some erotic games, including many, many more over the course of the last 15 years.
Andrew also DJs video game music as a hobby and has a big collection of memorabilia, mostly signed by composers.
Andrew has a ton of stories of things that have happened during the 17 years he's been living in Japan that aren't necessarily related to his career. He had a run-in with a chimpira and got knocked out cold in Koenji, for example, and has had other run-ins with the Yakuza that were interesting. Andrew tends to be that guy who goes where other foreigners don't.
Andrew also holds a bachelor's degree in English composition from University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. So, Andrew, thank you so much for coming today and being on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Andrew, you seem to be involved in quite a lot here in Japan and in the Japanese video game industry. Before we get into that, can we first ask you about your Japan story and what brought you here initially?
It was actually very random. Of course, as you mentioned in the bio, I've been interested in Japan since I was a very young kid. And even after I switched from music recording and percussion into English, I took on a lot of projects that were related to Japan, even within that major. I was studying a lot of Japanese movies at the time. There were a lot of horror remakes, for example, of movies that had only come out in Japan like a year before. Like you had Ringu becoming The Ring, and you had Ju-on becoming The Grudge. And I was really interested in why they were remaking movies like that had only been out a year. I didn't really understand why that was being done. And so I just kind of took that on as a subject of interest. And it was around that time, actually, on Halloween, I remember I was at my friend's house and I opened the university newspaper, and there was an ad for the JET program. And being an English major, I mean, it's kind of just, it's akin to toilet paper. I mean, it's as a major, like it doesn't really translate to a lot of fields unless you're going to teach or get into like copy editing or that kind of work. And so I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself at the time. So I felt, a year in Japan or so, might do me some good, give me some time to figure myself out and what I want to do next. And I applied the first time, got rejected, and being a very competitive person, I had to go for it again. So I went actually to Japan as a volunteer English camp counselor for about 2 months, non-paid, but it was a free trip to Japan. Actually really hard work. And I came back the next time, applied again, and got in as an alternate. And then eventually that led to me actually getting in. And that's how I ended up in Yamanashi, which was my JET placement.
Yamanashi. And you were there for how many years?
I was in Yamanashi for almost 3. I'll admit I quit a few months early because the normal JET program, I think it runs from July 24th or 31. That's like the period from year to year. But we all know that in Japan, the number one time to look for jobs is April. And so I wanted to be able to get out at a time where I had more options in terms of where I was going to go next.
So what part of Yamanashi were you in?
I was in Isawa Onsen. And there's a funny story about that because it's we're already getting into the Yakuza stuff, but it's like a notoriously rough school. And one thing I didn't mention about, I mentioned the horror projects I did in university, but one thing I didn't mention was my final project. And I actually brought it up in my JET essay because you have to write an essay when you're applying for the job. And this was a huge risk to do. But I had my final paper in university was a 30-page report comparing Koenji Fukasaku's Battle Royale to the bursting of the Japanese economic bubble and the youth violence surge that happened after that. And I wrote about why this was important to me, and it took up a big part of my JET essay. And I'm pretty sure that's why they decided to send me to one of the most crime-ridden junior high schools in all of Japan. Being an onsen town, you've got most of my students were the kids of Yakuza, are the kids of hostesses, or even sex workers and that. So that when we had the sports days and that, we had to have a really interesting cast of characters that would show up.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, you're 100% just by seeing them in person, you could just tell they were from these worlds. Or
they had an aura, and of course, I mean, hostesses and that, you can kind of tell by the way they dress and the way they present themselves and that kind of thing. It doesn't really change. They're not dressing all that normally, even for those days. It was really fun, actually. I like to interact with them because I was actually doing it on a nightly basis. It's not a big town and not many other foreigners. So you want to go out, you want to socialize a bit, but there's a lot of sketchy places to socialize. And I was I wasn't afraid of anything in terms of where to go, mentioned in the bio again. So I pretty much went anywhere. And I met all kinds of crazy people. I remember the first Yakuza I ever met that actually told me he was one, and the izakaya master confirmed it. He had this quirk where he really wanted to look like Marlon Brando from The Godfather. It was his big thing. He wanted to be like the Japanese Marlon Brando, and he's like, "Am I pulling it off?" He just couldn't it was he just wanted me to tell him that, yeah, you nailed it.
That confirmation.
Exactly.
Did he actually look like Marlon Brando?
He actually did. I wasn't giving him lip service or anything. He really was pulling it off. I was impressed. I mean, a Japanese Marlon Brando. I mean, if you saw the two of them next together, you would know which one was which.
I have to say, That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, that's a very envious experience compared to most other jets, I imagine. I mean, during the day you're teaching the kids, and at the night you can hang out with all of the adults who are in various industries that you don't really get to interact with, even here in Tokyo.
That has to be the most unique jet experience I've ever heard about.
I mean, I have more, but
I'm listening.
We had one of my students actually got killed.
Whoa!
By another
how old?
student. I think he was, I want to say, Ichinense or Ninense. And the student who apparently did it, this actually happened 3 months after I left, but it was one of my former teachers who told me it happened. And we had big problems at that school. I mean, like I told you earlier, I wasn't kidding when I said it was like me writing about Battle Royale is probably the reason I ended up there. The story goes is that he fell off his bike into an irrigation ditch, and Yamanashi is famous for grapes and agriculture. So like alongside the roads, there's these deep slopes that are pretty dangerous if you're going to fall into them. The story goes that this kid pushed him off his bike from behind, was bullying him, and the kid broke his neck on the fall. And it was considered an accident officially. But from what I've heard from like the teachers at the school, like everybody knows that that wasn't the case.
Wow.
Whoa.
We also had a strange continuing occurrence where, you know how do you know how like standardized tests work in Japan in terms of grade schools? They're usually held on like Thursday and a Friday, like it's 2 days in a row. The Thursday night, we routinely had to like guard the school like in the later years that I was there, because the first year and a half or so, if we didn't do that on Thursday night, the students would come and throw rocks and break all the windows so that the like second day would be canceled.
Oh my God. I've never heard about this kind of experience teaching here in Japan. That's wild.
I mean, like I would hear from other jet teachers in my prefecture that when they had the like meeting where they would announce where teachers were getting like transferred to, because they do that every year, like the ones that were like getting sent to my school would like openly weep, and the other teachers would come and like pat them on the back and comfort them. But like the funny thing is, like I didn't have like most of the problems, because like most of the students liked me. They thought I was cool. So like they didn't give me a hard time. Like actually I had more teachers resent me than anything else because of that, because they were getting a hard time from the students, but the students just thought I was cool, so they would leave me alone.
Is this like a well-known, because down in Kyushu, there's like a famous Yakuza spot that like reporters don't even go to.
Yeah,
because
Kyushu, the Kudokai.
The Kudokai.
Yeah, the most murderous Yakuza group in Japan.
Like police reporters, nobody goes there because like they don't come back. Is this kind of on a similar level? Like, is this a specific Yakuza group that's there in Yamanashi?
It's not like, it has nothing to do with the Yakuza group that's there. It's just the school itself is bad. I think it's too big. It's in a town of, well, it was Isawa and it became like Fufukishi, but like it's a very, very small town, but a very, very big junior high school with like 600 plus students. It's very busy. And I think when you get that many students together and you develop a culture there at the school, it kind of continues. You know how like senpai kohai works? I almost think it kind of works in the same fashion, where you have people who are watching like the third year students do this as first year students, and that's what they just end up becoming themselves.
It's kind of like a negative feedback loop. Just
yeah, I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So Andrew, when we met at Bit Summit.
Yeah. Does everybody know what Bit Summit is?
Let's maybe give them. Could you summarize what Bit Summit is?
I mean, Bit Summit is kind of an exhibition and celebration of indie developers, essentially. Like, these are games that are not a big deal yet. A lot of them not released. Some of them will never be released. But like, you know, they come there, they exhibit their games so that the general public that would normally not be able to see these games can not only see them but play them as well. Plus, it's an amazing networking opportunity, and drinking by the river is always a blast, which is where we met.
And the drinking by the river, I would say, is where the real Bit Summit takes place. You know what if you know what I mean?
I agree with you completely.
Yeah, like I learned that the second day. The first night I didn't go out, but the second night I went out. I'm like, oh, this is where I can actually make some connections, because everyone's getting drunk, and it's beautiful Kyoto in August by the river. So
what is it? Communication. Like, what's the word for that?
Nominication.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's exactly what it is, and it's really important in Japan. And honestly, like, the number one reason I go to shows like that and Tokyo Game Show, which is why I'm in Tokyo this week, is not to see what the games are or anything like that. It's to reconnect and meet new people. It makes it entirely worth the trip.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Bit Summit, it's every August in Kyoto.
I think it's been held in July as well. It's getting mixed up. Obviously, COVID had a big impact on how events are held and if they're held at all. So I actually think August is not maybe the best month for it.
Really hot.
Because Kyoto's a basin. And so the basins tend to like collect heat in the summer and get hotter than anywhere else. Like Yamanashi was one too. Taking a shower was such a waste of time because you'd get out and you'd already be drenched in sweat immediately.
No, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. But yeah, super hot. So we met at Bit Summit, and then we were really, I think as soon as I said hello, we started vibing out to Japanese game music. And I wanted to ask you, obviously you're extremely passionate about music. What was it like having to switch from music to English composition in college? And, given how, passionate you are, do you have any plans to get back into music at all?
That's a very good question. I'm actually completely medical cleared to play as of right now. And I've actually played drums a few times over the years since then. But the problem with it, well, I guess I'll answer the first part of the question first, which is it was absolutely devastating when it happened. But it was one of the best things that ever happened. I remember, like, my dad took me for a walk, and like, I don't take failure very well. It happens to anybody, but he took me for a walk and he's like, yeah, you know what? It happened for a reason and you'll move on to something better. And he was absolutely right. And I was not the best sound engineer and I was not the best percussionist by a long run. But those were my loves, and I just was very stubbornly attached to them. I was much better at writing in English, and, maybe it's not my first love, but it's also up there, so why not? And, when it comes to getting back into music now, like, I still will, like, play a little bit of piano or, like, fumble around with things. But I think for drums, it's going to be impossible because even my brain still thinks I can play everything. It still remembers the beats I was playing 20 years ago. But it's almost like an athlete, like where their mind knows what to do and their body just won't do it for them anymore. Like my legs will just lag way behind, and there's nothing more frustrating. It's just like, move, damn it. And,
right.
And it just, nothing you can do will like make it work. Maybe I could practice every day for like a year and get back to like half as good as I was. But at that point, what's really the point? So that's why I decided, okay, I want to do something else. And that's why I went in the direction of DJing. It's like, okay, I have no experience. I'm starting from scratch. It doesn't matter if I'm 70 years old, I can still do it. And that's the big advantage for, in terms of that change, I think.
So transitioning from an assistant language teacher to translation and then to translating for some of the biggest games in the world is no small feat. Could you tell us more about that experience?
I didn't think I could do it. And, when I came to Japan, I came here, like I said, to teach for maybe a year or two and then go back home and get, some kind of job. I didn't know what, but just get some. Of course, like from a very early age, I actually did want to go into games. I did want to become a like game localizer. But like I looked at most of my heroes and they had went to like Harvard or Princeton or universities like that. And I'm like, I'm from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I went to a state school. And this is a job that clearly lots of people would want to do. So what right do I have to do it? You know, I'm just like, I'm not from the country, but I'm not necessarily from anywhere important either. So when I came to Japan, like that wasn't even on my mind, but through, well, a dating site, I ended up on dates with the director, one of the localization directors of Square Enix.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah.
On a dating site.
Yeah, because who are you going to find in Yamanashi? And so I was like, looking for people in Yokohama or Tokyo, just, you know, it's a bigger well to work with.
Right.
And so, yeah, she came up from Tokyo to Yamanashi, and like, all I knew from her profile, she works in games, and then it's like, oh yeah, I work at Square Enix. I'm like, what? You know? And that was like, you know, I still didn't really like think anything of it that much at the time, but you know, she found out that I was in creative writing, and she like saw some of my work, and she's like, you know what? Like, we have lots of people who are great at understanding Japanese, but they can't write all that well. And it's like, and she's like, really, you're just Japanese ability away from breaking into this. And I was like, are you serious? And she's like, oh yeah, totally. And so, I mean, that really inspired me. That's actually what made me start studying Japanese in the first place. Because when I came to Japan, I had nothing, and I had no intent to study. Then after that, like, it was funny. Like, she might hate me for telling this story, but I already told it in another interview, so I didn't care. But she broke up with me because during a phone call, I called her cat the wrong name. Like, it was her. Oh man, I'm not going to make the same mistake again. Like, I think the cat's name was Kotaro, and I called it like Momotaro or something like that. It was, I don't remember, but like, in her defense, like, Square Enix was working her to death to the point that she was like sleeping under her desk instead of going home, and she eventually, like, you know, had to like leave the job for quite a long time because of that. So she was, you know, high strung at the time, so that it's fine. But 2 or 3 months later, she came back to me and she's like, Andy, would you like to interview for a game localization test with Square Enix, like, as a freelancer? I'm like, well, of course I would. And at the time, I only had JLPT level 3, which is middling. It's not bad, but it's not great either. It's certainly not translation level. And I'm like, well, because I can do the test at home, maybe I can set up this battle station of dictionaries and textbooks around me during the test that'll allow me to check things out as I go and like fill in the gaps. And so the test is broken into 2 segments, right? The first part is a creative writing portion, and then the second one is the actual translation test. And I found out I was competing against one other guy. And I was like, one other guy. Okay, those are good odds. That's 50-50, right? Yeah. And so I took the creative writing test, and I destroyed it. Like, the other guy was eliminated from competition just on that. So all I had to do was pass the translation test. And it was brutal. You had an hour to do it, and it was 2 pages long, and it had, first part was a conversation between like a samurai and a pirate. So you had like really, really honorific, like polite language, and then really, really rough language. Then you had like this really vocab dense description of like some world or kingdom or something like that. And then you had like item names, town names, and of course a lot of them are just a string of kanji. So it's just, you know, I was kind of in tears at the end of it, and of course I bombed it. But it motivated me. And from that point on, I was studying about 4 or 5 hours a day, every day after work. I wasn't a big fan of teaching really either. But I wanted to stay in Japan at that point. And I felt just once you have a goal, once you have something you want to strive for, like that's all you need to really kind of make it here, I think. And what eventually happened, this is the fun part of the story. I know that was really long and I'm sorry, but so I got sick, but I was invited to a wedding in the next town as a foreigner marrying a Japanese woman. And, I wasn't feeling well, but I decided, well, I want to be a good friend. And I went there, ended up getting introduced to the guy that I was competing with on that trial.
Whoa.
And he doesn't even live in Yamanashi. He lives in Aichi. But he was there just for that wedding. And he's like, oh, wow, that was you? Like, well done. Hey, I can introduce you to Jeremy Blaustein, who translated Silent Hill and Pokemon and other game and Suikoden and other games like that. And he did that, and that's how I started working. Like, I got my first job through him. I met Jeremy last night, like at a Tokyo Game Show after party. I mean, we've been working together for 14, 15 years at this point.
Wow, what are the odds?
I don't know.
That's wild. That's wild.
So the conclusion of the story is for the Square Enix thing, though. Did you get that or not?
I did not. I passed the creative writing test with flying colors. The translation test, I was only able to finish 25% of it in the allotted time. I was definitely not ready. I've actually looked at it pretty recently, and I still wonder if I could finish it in an hour. Like, one fun fact about me as a localizer is, in the entire time I've been doing this, every non-time test I've taken, I have passed. Every time test I've taken, I have failed. I have never passed to this day a test where I have an hour limit or like a 30-minute limit. But if you give me enough time to do it right, I always nail it. Yeah.
It's like different kinds of learners and different kinds of work styles, right? I think goes into that.
Well, I think there's like 3 big skills that are involved here, and a time test eliminates 2 of them. The problem with time test is that they test your ability to understand extremely well. Like, if you're going to be able to understand it just like that and put some on page, like a time test can work for those kind of applicants. The problem is, I'm not that type. I'm the type that excels in output, like the English I put on page. And that's something I need to toy with. I need to toy with the rhythm of a sentence. I need to look at the words involved. I need to look at like alliteration and stuff like that and how it flows. Like, I mean, probably because I was a drummer, like the rhythm of a sentence is actually really important to me. And if the sentence isn't rhythmically correct in my mind, I cannot leave it as is. And the other thing is research. I would like research things constantly and try to like figure out, okay, is there something behind this? Is there something else going on? And so I also like to leave a lot of comments because I take a lot of creative liberties even during like translation tests. And if you don't leave comments, like they're just going to assume that it's a mistranslation. They're not going to think that you know what you're doing essentially, So yeah. They're going to think, oh, this guy didn't understand the sentence, when in fact, no, I did. And I decided that this was a better fit for that line.
So, okay, this is bringing up a big question I have, and it's about game translations.
Sure.
So, like, if you look at games like Final Fantasy VII and other JRPGs from the 90s, like, notoriously, the English translations were really bad, right?
Yeah.
And you said something I totally agree with. I think, like, taking those creative liberties after you translate it to almost kind of rewrite it in a sense so that it makes sense to the audience is really important. I see games that do that very well. Like Nier Automata, I think did it really well in the English version. I don't know if you would agree or not.
I do agree.
Oh, Okay, so
that was done by 8-4, and they did an excellent job on it.
Yes, that was so good. That I played that game with the, in English and with the English audio, which, a lot of games I'll just keep it in Japanese because the Japanese is usually better. But with the Final Fantasy VII remake and a lot of other big AAA titles, they still don't seem to, get it right. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
I would. I really don't know if I should say this, but almost every year when I go to Tokyo Game Show and I go to the Square Enix booth, like I see some lines that I'm just like, who wrote that? Like, I mean,
yeah.
But the thing is, like, most of these companies, they're not like having the same pool of people like localize. They're outsourcing a lot of it to different companies, like 8-4, which I was brought up being like one of the boutique agencies, as we would say. They're kind of held in a little bit higher regard, and they have a smaller team of people that are very, very focused on what they're doing at the time. But like the majority of games aren't sent to those agencies, and then some of them are done in-house. And some of the people in-house, while that's a prestigious position to have, aren't necessarily experienced. They might like have great ability, a lot of promise, but that doesn't mean that they're really seasoned localizers at this point.
Well, we're going to switch gears, and we're going to switch gears in a pretty violent way. So you also mentioned that you've done some work for erotic games in Japan. I think a lot of people overlook just how big the adult industry is here in Japan and, of course, overseas. Could you tell us a bit more about your experience in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, with the erotic games, a lot of times bigger is better, but...
no pun intended.
Yeah, well, pun intended, but... But that's a very interesting one for me. I think the first time that it ever came up is it hasn't been held for a few years now because of COVID, but an aforementioned 8-4, the leader of that company, John Ricciardi, is the guy who managed this. But there was a Thursday night like game industry get together called Otaru, which was held in Nakameguro every week. And so it was a great opportunity for like a bunch of us to get together, meet new people who might have been in town but aren't usually there. And it was a great networking opportunity. And I think that's when it first came up, the idea of me like possibly like working on erotic games. I never thought much of it, but I kind of thought it'd just be cool to do a tentacle game at least once. I'm like, writing about tentacles might be fun. And it's something, it's a nice conversation starter, right? I'm Andrew Klim, game localizer and tentacle porn translator, but I
might get us a few extra listens.
But anyway, I had like a chance to work on these games. I actually went to DMM's head office, which DMM is probably the biggest company involved in those types of games in Japan. It's also doing Eikaiwa now, apparently. So
they do everything.
Yeah, they really do everything.
Bitcoin, Eikaiwa, erotic games.
Yeah. And I actually went there for a meeting, and it was a trippy experience because I got there about probably 10 minutes early, and I was at the reception, and they had 3 receptionists, all pretty much looked the same, sitting behind the desk. And I kid you not, almost every minute, right at the turn of the minute, they would come over, bow, and apologize that I was still waiting. And I'm like, you really don't have to do this. I'm fine. Like, I'll just wait. I'm like, I can go over there so you can sit back down. Yeah. But it was just weird. And then, DMM, like, it's like, oh, this is like erotic game leader. You expect this like really like crazy office setting. No, it's just a bunch of cubicles and white walls, and it is super boring. And that ended up not leading to work for me, which was really disappointing. Because I just wanted to be able to do it once. Why not? But then later, an American company that they hired actually offered more money than I was asking to do the same thing I was asking to do. So I'm like, I got to do it anyway.
Oh, there you go.
The funny thing was, though, style guide. So I was all excited. Okay, I'm going to get to do a tentacle one. This is going to be funny. It's going to be, a laugh riot. I look at the style guide, and I kid you not, it said, in the case of tentacle interaction, please limit it to one tentacle only. I was like, what? Like, I mean, why? Like,
right.
Yeah, and I even emailed the project manager. And are you serious about this? I have to rewrite this as a single tentacle. It's like yeah, that's what the higher ups are saying. I'm like, okay. So I got around it, and they probably edited me down after this, but I just added a bunch of tendrils to the single tentacle so that it had extra appendages anyway.
Wow.
And I got around it like that. But honestly, that's ancient history, and it's not the best work I've done. More recently, I've been doing more interesting stuff. Actually, right before I came here, I had lunch with my main client for that type of work. It was delicious, by the way, sandwiches. But the one thing about erotic games that I really, really enjoy, as opposed to maybe AAA games or other types of games, is that they don't take themselves that seriously. It's actually the best place to do comedy or puns or to really play with the language. You have a lot more creative freedom in what you're doing. And also, even though the base pay, I mean, we usually get paid by Japanese character, even though the base pay is usually lower than it would be on most games. When you factor in all the ahs and oohs, you're getting for each that's ka-ching, 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 ka-ching,
really?
Ka-ching. Yeah. So you're getting paid for each one of those. And so in that way, it can add up pretty quickly because you're just literally holding down the A, holding down the O, and just, making cash doing it. But honestly, lately I've had a couple games in particular where I've just had a lot of fun doing them. And I just found out today that I'm going to get the third one, and I'm super excited to do it.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that Japan is kind of known for. Even when I was back in high school, 2002, 2003, everybody knew that there was weird Japanese hentai porn and weird Japanese video games that in the US they could never release them, but the Japanese version had nudity and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And actually, content is something worth talking about, because there are a lot of people who do what I do who won't touch the material at all. And then there's people with limits within that. And honestly, there is a very, very wide range of Japanese content out there where I draw the line. I can deal with up to verbal abuse, but that's about as far as I go. When it comes to actual physical violence, and sometimes even, stuff that's potentially lethal, I won't touch that. It doesn't matter how much money you give me. I can't do that. I literally just can't stomach it.
Right. I just have a side question. If you don't know anything about this, we can cut it out.
Sure.
I think it was the 80s, the 90s, Japan only had this extremely powerful computer / video game console. I forgot what it was called. And it was super expensive, between $10,000, $20,000. And it had hyper violent, hypersexual games on it. And I think I saw this on YouTube. They were talking and they were showing scenes, and even I was like, oh my God, I would never be able to play that game. Just terrible horror and just crazy. Have you heard of any of this kind of stuff?
I haven't heard of this device in particular, but I mean, the level that the Japanese content will go is just otherworldly compared to what you'll get in the States normally. It's just,
right.
And there's stuff that's absolutely bonkers. I mean, just you're almost like laughing looking at it, because it's like, who came up with this? Who had this like trapped in their head and needed it to get out, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I've nothing in those games surprises me anymore. But like I said, there's some stuff that like I just can't touch. Like as long as it doesn't go beyond that limit, like I'm pretty okay with it. And a lot of it doesn't, at least the parties involved are enjoying it. At least it's, I can't say in my recent game that it's always consensual, but there's, maybe it is consensual, but they're pretending it's not, kind of a vibe going on. It can get really complicated, to be honest. And one thing that I was talking about with my client at launch, like they always try to release their games on Steam too, and they try to have an adult version and a watered down version.
Ah, okay.
So that they can get it on there, because that's a big part of sales, right? But the Steam censors are really, really causing a lot of headaches for them. Like, because they can't really make rhyme or reason of why games they think should be getting released aren't, and Steam doesn't tell them. So it's definitely like a moneymaker for sure for a bit, until it gets pirated and then patched, but that's another story.
Gotcha. So real quick, going back to Bit Summit, another thing you showed me at Bit Summit were some epic videos of you DJing game music. Could you tell us a little bit how you got started in that?
Well, as you know, I had a huge love of music, and that didn't change even after I stopped playing it. And once I came to, I had gone to some events while I was still living in Tokyo. Like there's Square Sounds in Koenji where I was living, where there's a lot of DJs from all over the world. And well, not just DJs, but also performers that come and do video game music. So I was aware of such events. But once I moved to Osaka, like one of my best friends that I quickly met there was actually DJing game music and had been doing it for 10 years. And I would go to some shows, and I'm like, eventually I got to a point where it's like, I want to try this out. Like, let's see how this goes. And it turned out to be an absolute blast. But at the same time, it's a little bit frustrating, because like the other people doing it are just amazing. They've been doing it for so long, and like the scene is well established there, and you're just kind of fumbling along, but doing your best. I would say though, for me, it's just like the nostalgia factor makes it really great. Like you can try to find these songs that maybe the other people know, maybe they don't, but when they do and they haven't heard it for like 20 years, everybody's like, ah, yeah.
Right.
And so like the first set I did was pretty generic. I remember it was for one of my birthday events. And it was just stuff like Ninja Gaiden or Smurfs from Game Boy or like Parasite Eve. Can't remember even what I ended with, but it was just a pretty mixed up set and went okay. But then since then, I decided to do mostly theme sets. Like I'll be like, okay, this is going to be a PC game only set, or this is going to be an Super Nintendo RPG set. And then, you try to craft it around that, but it's really hard. Like, even though you're only going to perform for like 30 or 40 minutes, especially early on when you don't know what you're doing, I literally spent like 100+ hours like on a set, just each morning, like walking around the park, listening to track after track after track, trying to figure out what's going to like work with what. You also have to match BPMs. Like you don't want to be all over the place. You want everything to flow. And so it's just a puzzle. You're constantly mixing and matching pieces, trying to make it work. And it's challenging but fun, but it is really time consuming. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it's still fun. So it's a good hobby. Like I really enjoy it, but at the same time, I don't really take it too seriously, because I don't want to. I have no desire to like do like bigger events or even make a little side money off it. For me, I just like doing the occasional bar event from time to time, and enjoying like DJing alongside like people who are way better at it than I am.
So, these days, a lot of people just DJ with their computer and they premix everything, and other people prefer to, do it the old school way. How do you mix your music?
The way I do it is I use a side mixer and also my computer. So what I do is I get like the tracks up in a program called Tractor. I assemble the list. And then using the controller, that's what I want to say, like DJ controller, I like can manipulate what's going on with the computer. And just a combination of the two. And having the computer, I actually really like. I mean, there are CD DJs, vinyl DJs and that. But having the computer really helps, because sometimes I'll get a request during a set and I can just hit the Wi-Fi, download something, like try to throw it in there. And it gives you a lot more versatility.
No, for sure. I was going to ask you, are you doing any shows this week for Tokyo Game Show, or do you know of any epic shows going on?
At the moment, I actually don't. And there were events in the past that would accompany Tokyo Game Show. Usually before COVID, like Tuesday up through Sunday, there would be like pretty big after parties and like events set up all over the place. They're not really back to that this year yet. They're having the event, but they're kind of keeping those gatherings to a minimum. So unfortunately right now, I don't really know of anything. And I don't know the Tokyo scene at the moment all that well. I think actually typically the Koenji event is held around this time of year. It's in September, but I would have to check. Like, I mean, I really don't know.
So you're not based in central Tokyo these days. Where are you these days?
I live in Kyobashi in Osaka.
Awesome. So you're basically in the middle of Osaka.
That's right, yeah.
What's the Osaka scene like?
I mean, in terms of music?
No, just in general.
In general? I mean, okay. Well, I mean, I know this is called Tokyo Wave, so I don't want to get too down on Tokyo, but like for me, it's a great place to visit, but not to live. Like I lived here 4 years and it kind of grinded on me over a period of time. I just find Osaka to be much friendlier, much more livable than Tokyo. Sure, there's some things that Osaka doesn't have, but not much. And I think it's actually a better location in terms of reaching as much of the country as possible. It's much more centralized than Tokyo is, which is farther east. The food is amazing. It has like, it's Akihabara in Denden Town, or like, Umira, which could be like arguably a Shinjuku. It has these places, but you could arguably walk them in 40 minutes as opposed to having to get on a train or like going like a further distance. So I liked how it's much more compact. I mean, I could go on and on. I know like everybody has their personal preference, and like I've had an amazing couple days in Tokyo, and I know when I leave I'll be totally exhausted. But I just think in terms of living, Osaka is a much better fit for me personally.
That's cool. I also really like Osaka. I've only been there a few times myself, but every time I go, I have an awesome time. The food's good. People are friendly. It's just like, it's a totally different vibe,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, it's just, for me personally, I tend to be a very social person. And one thing I really like, and I live in Kyobashi, which is kind of one of the centers for it, but like we tend to have a lot more tachinomi in Osaka, like places like, stand and drink locations, as opposed to the mainly kind of izakaya culture, like where people kind of stick to their own group and don't associate quite as much. I mean, it's gotten better, but the way I see it, Osaka is just much, much more social. And I appreciate that because I live alone. I work alone. Like I don't have like, you know, a company party, like group of people to go out with and like have drinks. It's just me. So if I don't have people willing to talk to me, and not just talk to me because they want to practice English, but actually talk to me, it can be a very lonely existence.
No, definitely. Like one of my favorite things about, you know, some places even in Tokyo, but I'll agree with you, they are in limited numbers. It's just, you know, going out for some drinks, meeting new people, you know, kind of just having conversations with people you'll probably never meet again. It's kind of fun.
I have to agree. Every time I've had to go, or, you know, for work or whatever, West Japan, whether it be Kyoto, Osaka, or Fukuoka, every time it's always like an epic night. I meet a bunch of new people. Like you said, people standing, drinking outside. All of a sudden we make friends. We go to karaoke. That happens in Tokyo, but it's a lot harder to get it to work. Like you got to be at the right bar in Shibuya or Shinjuku and, you know, meet a group of people. It's a lot harder here.
Yeah, I think just the Tokyo culture is much more, you know, stick to your own group. You know, if you came with your group of friends, that's who you're going to hang out with. And it's very insular versus, you know, I think other places around Japan. Even, I mean, just if we compare Tokyo with essentially any other metropolitan area, I think, you know, other places just tend to be just a little bit more, I don't want to say, you know, homely, but like it's sort of like Cheers, you know, where everybody knows your name, except not. They'll probably forget it. They're pretty drunk.
No, I really appreciate Osaka though. I'm thinking about the last time I was there, and you know, all the famous comedians come from Osaka as well. And that culture kind of is everywhere already. Everyone's trying to make jokes, trying to make you laugh. There's a real, like, that's kind of the drive and the goal for like conversations, it seems.
Oh yeah, exactly. And like historically, Osaka was known for its merchants. And if you're not communicating with people, you can't be a good merchant. So like, I think that's just become a part of the culture where you want to reach out and talk to people more for that reason.
Try to get some money out of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sometimes you get a free drink.
Yeah, or 3.
Yeah.
One thing I have to ask, because, you know, you lived in Yamanashi, then you lived in Tokyo, then you moved to Osaka.
Actually, I lived in Yamanashi, then Yokohama, then Tokyo, and now Osaka.
So how long in Osaka now?
I've been in Osaka a total of, wow. Okay, I've been.
Do you need a calculator?
I think it's been around 10 years now.
Wow.
Wow.
No, it can't be. Sorry. Let me correct that because okay, I got it. So I was 3 years. I've been 17 years in Japan. So 3 years Yamanashi, 2 years Yokohama, 4 years Tokyo. So 6, 9. So the remaining 8 years would have been in Osaka.
All right. Addition and subtraction. We got it. 8 years. So my question for you is, you know, 8 years in Osaka. Do you speak Osaka Ben usually, or how does that work? Because obviously, you know, you basically kind of half and half, right? So,
well, half and half is exactly it. Like, I can understand it pretty well unless you get to the really deep stuff. Like, some of that goes over my head. But I hear it enough where, you know, I know what people are saying. I try to incorporate more and more of it into my speaking, but obviously my first 9 years and most of my study occurred in Kanto, so it's kind of hard to escape that. Like, gradually over time, maybe in 20 years, like I'll eventually get to full-on Kansai Ben, but it may never happen. It's
something to aspire to.
It is something to aspire to. If I really like sat down every day and just like studied Kansai Ben and practiced it, maybe I could like get there, but I don't really have any desire to do that. Like, as long as people understand what I'm saying well enough, or we can have a good conversation, it's all I really care about at the end of the day.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I love the various dialects of Japanese, and, you know, Kansai Ben, especially like when some people, you know, speak it in a certain way, it's just so persuasive and so rhythmic. And they can say the funniest shit.
Nandeyanen.
Yeah. and it's just like, I wish I could do that, but, you know, 16 years in Tokyo, I'm screwed. There's no way in hell I'm going to get that.
Yeah. I am envious too, especially on Japanese TV, like with the good dramas or with like the good comedians, they're using really, really heavy Osaka Ben. It's like, damn, wish I could pull that off.
Yeah, it's just I think, you know, that the way they speak and the way they deliver, it's just like, it's almost embedded into the culture.
Yeah.
And so going back to the underworld, you also mentioned a run-in with a, quote, chimpira in Koenji. First of all, for those of our listeners who don't know, what is a chimpira? And can you tell us more about this experience?
Sure. Well, I mean, it essentially can mean a low-level Yakuza, or it can just be like a kid who's like a punk or a delinquent. I call them kind of wannabe Yakuza. It's not the real thing. Like, the older ones I've met have been actually generally very nice and respectful, and these guys are usually asshats. So I would definitely not consider them the same thing. So, all right. Yeah, I mentioned this story to Randall, and, you know, it piqued its curiosity, so let's go. Sorry, like, Aaron, right?
Either or is okay. It's been a long time since someone's called me Randall. My friend's back in Florida.
One of my best friends in Tokyo is actually called Randall, so like
I have two first names. No, I have three actually. My middle name's the first name as well.
Yeah, sorry. Like, whenever people have that, like, it always throws me off. Okay, so going back, like, so I mentioned this to Aaron, and it piqued his interest. So, like, here we go. It was during one of the World Cups, I believe about maybe 10, 11 years ago. And I can't remember where the World Cup was at the time, but
I remember that World Cup. I think it was 2010.
That's what I was thinking it was, like, because I was trying to remember ahead of coming here. So it was probably that. Do you remember where it was?
I do not remember where it was, but I think Japan did really, really good that year. So, oh man, it was lit. Like, every bar you went to, it was all over the place. People were getting absolutely wasted and having the time of their lives.
So it was in South Africa, and I actually watched
the Vuvuzelas.
Oh yes,
yeah.
You got it.
And
yeah.
I watched that from Florida because at the time I was friends with, you know, people from just all these different countries because of the program I was in at my university. But I remember for 2 or 3 weeks we binged soccer, and I had never really watched that much soccer before.
You only binge soccer, huh? But anyway. So, but because it was in South Africa, a lot of the games were on extremely late in Japan. Like, it was like it was cycled out, but like the last games of the day would be at like 2, 3 a.m. Yeah. It was something ridiculous like that. And so I was out really, really late, and I was coming back from the last game that day, walking through Koenji, pretty close to the station. And I saw two chimpira going at it. And I can't even say going at it because one guy was just destroying the other guy. It wasn't even funny. Like, he was sitting on his chest and he was hitting him sore in the face that blood was coming out of the back of the head of the other guy. Oh my God. And like, my thinking was, you know, there were like Japanese people just watching this and of course not interfering at all. But seeing it, I had two thoughts in mind. I'm like, well, the guy getting hit is in serious trouble, and so is the guy hitting him if he takes this any further. So, you know, my alcohol-fueled brain decided that I was going to go in and restrain the guy who was doing the hitting. And so I did so. I mean, I was twice the size. The guy was tiny. But so I just put my arms around him. I restrained him and was like, tried to get him to calm down and give the other guy a chance to get up and, you know, out of the way, or at least have somebody else pull him out of the way if he couldn't get up himself. And the one I was restraining eventually assured me, he's like, I'm fine. Like, he took a deep breath to show that, you know, he had calmed down. So I let him go, and I went to check on the other guy. He decked me right in the back of the head as hard as I could, as hard as he could. And I remember spinning around once, and then I was out. Like, when I came to, I was off to the side a little bit. The guy who punched me was still there kicking at my feet with an officer, like they're saying, like he was saying to the officer, see, he's fine, he's waking up, like, leave me alone. And like, meanwhile, this girl had an ice pack on my head, and the ambulance came and they took me to the police hospital, you know, checked my head out. Like, I mean, I still think to this day I had a concussion because I had real light sensitivity in that after that for a couple of weeks. But like, from their brain scan, there was no serious damage. And then they took me to this is another fun part of the story. They took me to the police department, and there were 5 officers there, and they're like, they all had concerned looks on their face, and they're like, so do you want to press charges? Like, and I was like, well, you know, I did get hit in the head, and I do have 20,000 yen in medical bills here that I don't really think I deserve. And, you know, they bit their lips and so they disappeared into the back room. And then 5 minutes later, they came out and gave me 20,000 yen in cash. Like, they're like, if you're not going to press charges, we'll just pay your medical bills. And I'm like, okay, I guess, you know. So then I just walked home from there, and that was it.
You know, my big question is, how do you identify a chimpira?
I mean, they were basically the touts. Like, they were around the station, the guys that are like, you know, dressed up in their like black suits and trying to get you to whatever like shady girls bar. Like,
those guys.
Yeah.
They're all around my local station all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, during the day, it's a Fudosan, you know, realtor guys. And then like at 6 p.m., all those guys go away and the chimpira come out. I've never messed with any of those guys though, but they all look like, yeah, really like they're much are they a part of the Yakuza? Or they?
I mean, it's, you know, we'd have to get a specialist on here to analyze it, but some of them are, some of them aren't. You know, there are also, you know, non-organized crime affiliated gangs. I mean, you know, Japan's underworld is complicated. So, I mean, obviously, you know, if they're in that line of work, they're probably pretty rough and tumble dudes. So, yeah, try and mess with them and hope you go to the gym.
Well, I mean, I probably could have taken that guy if he didn't cheap shot me, but I'm glad I didn't, because if it would have accelerated further, who knows, you know, what could have happened. So I actually think it's a blessing in disguise that he hit me the way he did and knocked me out cold, because I wasn't able to react in any way, shape, or form.
Right on, yeah. Geez, well, switching up gears a little bit, when we met at Bit Summit, you shared your love for Streets of Rage composer Yuzo Koshiro, who happened to be performing at Bit Summit that evening. Could you tell us a little bit more about, you know, him and what got you into his music?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, well, he's widely considered one of the great, like, game music composers that's existed, period. And the thing about him is that he's got a very wide range. Like, he's as famous for orchestrated stuff as he is for like techno or like drum and bass and that kind of stuff. So like, my first time hearing him was the game ActRaiser, which is very orchestral in nature. And actually, I was such a big fan of that soundtrack as a kid that like I had a practice pad for snare drum, and I would just like play the drum parts along with it. Like, I used to, back in the day, would take cassette tapes, and because there were no like soundtracks at the time. So I would play the stage on my TV and then record it onto a cassette tape using my dad's stereo. And then I would like have my Walkman that I would like use to play it back and like drum along with it. And so like that was like way back, probably junior high school or early high school. I was always doing that. So I was familiar with him. And of course I had a Sega Genesis too. And he also did Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage 1 and 2 being just epically amazing soundtracks that are probably his most famous works. But he really has done quite a few things. So like for me, I actually chose the day I went and the time I went to Bit Summit because he was going to be performing. I could have actually had a better networking experience, even though I wouldn't have met you if I had gone the day before, because more people that I was going to try to meet were going that first day. But because of him, I went then. Like an interesting story about him though is what makes him unique is he was really into Western music and what was like popular at the time, and he wanted to emulate that. And so the way he prepared like for Streets of Rage was that he would go to clubs near the military bases in Japan and listen to what they were playing there. And then he modeled the sounds after that for that game, trying to do what he felt that a Western DJ might do for the music of that game.
Wow.
Whoa, that's interesting. I mean, to be perfectly honest with both of you, I don't even think I've ever played Streets of Rage, but I sure as hell know the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's one of the big ones for sure.
You know, and at Bit Summit too, the thing that really blew me away is he was with his left hand, he was playing all the parts on a MIDI keyboard. His setup was so badass. I was like, at first I saw him, but then I'm like, I think I saw another camera that you couldn't see it unless like, you know, you're at a certain angle of the stage. But once I saw he was live performing it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's pretty incredible. Because most people don't do that. Most people can't do that.
Oh no. I mean, I would comment more on what he was doing, but I was having such a nerdgasm at the time that I barely even remember it. So
yeah.
So also, Tokyo Game Show is happening right now as we're recording, and you've been attending it. How has it been so far?
It's a pretty good event. I feel like it's gone, like in terms of the quality of the content of the event itself, it's kind of gone downhill a little bit over the years. But that's not to say it's not a great show and not worth attending. I mean, in terms of the people I meet there and in terms of what I get out of it career-wise and what I get out of it experience-wise, it's always worth it, even if the content isn't as impressive as it used to be. Like one fun thing that was really funny is, and I wasn't expecting this, is that they had and I can't say the game, unfortunately, I'd like to, but NDA. They had a giant display and booth set up for a game that I literally finished translating like hours before like coming to Tokyo for this trip. And of course it was like a sample, so it didn't have the complete game yet. It's not like that we only finished the English this week, but I was able to actually play it in C lines that I had been like referencing for the translation I was doing in the game. And that's a really cool experience, because a lot of times when we're translating, it's just like an Excel file, or it's just a file uploaded into some kind of translation software. And so it feels much more personal when you actually see it in the game. It feels much more real in those cases. So like that was definitely a great experience for me. And then afterwards, when they gave me a survey to fill out, and the guy who was actually apparently checking the English for the team, because the team was all Japanese, came up to me being the only English speaker and like, you know, started talking to me. I just casually mentioned I translated a game, and they gave me all this like swag, and they were so happy. They were like, oh, thanks, you know, like, nice, great job. And I'm like, well, I didn't do all of it, but I hope you like the stuff I did do. So like stuff like that really makes it worthwhile. It at the end of the day, like the personal connections you get out of those shows Same for us with Bid Summit, are what really make them worthwhile. So even if like the content, like if there's good content, it's a bonus, but that's definitely not why I go to those events.
Well said. Yeah. So, Andrew, in closing, are there any personal projects you're working on right now that you'd like to tell our listeners, or any shout outs you'd like to make?
Unfortunately, the nature of the business, and it's very, very frustrating as a localizer, because we constantly want to talk about what we're working on. And we know so many things that casual fans don't know that we're really excited about, because we used to be fans ourselves. And we really, really want to say something. But we have NDA agreements all over the place that kind of prevent us from doing it. I can tell you that, generally speaking, what my next few projects I will be doing between now and the end of the month. I've got a major RPG that I will be editing, about 100 pages of text. I hope not much more than that. And then I'll have another RPG for translation, hopefully starting October 1st, but it's already been delayed on and off for 2 years. So I don't really trust that that's going to happen until it actually does. And then, like I said earlier today, I confirmed that I'll be doing the third game in that erotic game series that I've done the first 2 games for already. And I tentatively told the client that I think I'll be ready to do that starting in mid-October. But I don't know what the volume of that'll be, but that's an entire game, and those tend to be pretty thick. I think that would probably...
Thick, you say?
Thick. Very thick. And I think that would round out the rest of the year, probably. I doubt that outside of small things here and there, that I would be doing much more to the end of the year. So that's kind of where I stand right now. I wish I could give more details. It's so vague. It's almost nothing you can really work with, but that's how it is. It's just the nature of the beast.
Right. I'd love to know, what's the next big remake that Square Enix is going to do? Because I've heard rumors about that.
I mean, I know, but I can't tell
you. Oh my God.
But he can't tell you.
I mean, I also know about Tokyo Game Show announcements coming up that I can't say anything about. But
do you know when they're going to announce the new remake series?
That I don't know.
It's probably going to be forever. I'm so jealous that you know.
Because it's funny, even though we have NDAs, when you get game industry people together, it's kind of shoulder nudges. It's the knowledge gets passed around.
Right. It finds its way to Reddit somehow.
Wow, this has been such an interesting discussion. I mean, video game translator, erotic game translator, localization, getting punched out by a chimpira.
Your first experience teaching in Japan was at a Yakuza school as well. That's pretty wild.
It was. I mean, it definitely, I wouldn't call it a Yakuza school, but you could definitely see it that way. I actually have another Yakuza story that's probably the most bizarre story of anything that's happened to me in Japan. So I think it's worth mentioning. And maybe listeners won't believe that this actually happened. So it's up to you to believe it or not. But I was actually in Koenji, and this was literally probably about 20 yards away from where the other incident happened, where I got knocked out. And around Koenji, they have these yakitori joints called taisho with a lot of outdoor seating. They're really nice, really, really strong drinks for the price. I landed at one of them one night, and I was just sitting by myself. And at the tables were pretty dense at that time. I don't know if they still are with the pandemic and all that, but I was really, really close to 2 guys to the table over, and they were pretty big guys. But I want to say one of them left, and the other guy was still there, and he invited me to his table. I was pretty on my way at that point, drinking wise, and I was a little bit more bold than I'd normally be. And I asked him, I started asking him what he does. He's like, "Oh, I'm Yakuza," and I'm like, "No, you're not." And I teased him a little bit about it, and I kid you not, like the guy like turned around, lifted up the back of his shirt, and sure enough, he had like the full body tattoo that you would like come to expect. And, you know, okay, he had my attention at that point. And I asked him, I'm like, I don't know why I was this bold this night. It was really stupid what I did, but I did it. I asked him, I was like, so do you have like a business card? And he gave me a business card for some studio in Roppongi, and who knows, it could have been a porn studio, or I don't know. Like, I'm like, this isn't your real card. Like, do you have one for like that shows you're actually like Yakuza? Like I don't even want to say which. I know which group he was from, but I don't want to say like on this. But so he gave me this business card that had like gold print. It was vertically written, and I would assume it was the creed or something along those lines. It didn't have his like name necessarily, but it was a really, really impressive business card. And he let me leave with it. I remember I had my computer bag with me and I put it in there, and he let me leave with it. The next night, I'm drinking at the same place. And this is the part of the story that even I can't believe it. Like, and to this day, I maybe it didn't happen. But if it did, it's really, really cool. I had one drink, and I can hold my liquor, but I had one drink and blacked out. Ooh. And, you know, I still think I might have been drugged. Like, that's my theory, because I did go to the restroom a couple times. But I ended up finding myself in the Shotengai, and I didn't have my computer bag. And so I went to the police, reported it, and they said the most bizarre thing to me. Like, they said, we don't have it, but we think we'll find it. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What do you mean you think you'll find it, but you don't have it now? Like, do you have some leads on where it might be? Mm-hmm. You know? And then I start walking home, and about 20 or 30 minutes into the walk, I get a phone call, and they're like, oh, we found your bag. Like, you know, come back to the station, get it. And I got it. And I swear to you, the only thing missing from the bag was that business card. It was the only thing gone. And, you know, I've heard rumors that like the police and like the Yaks have some like connections as kind of working relationships on the side, and that I don't know if that's true. But like, I can't explain that story to this day. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It was the only thing gone from my bag. Now, like, there's two avenues I took with it. It's like, did they know that? Did the guy make a mistake in giving me the card? And did they, like, you know, drug my drink to get it back? Probably unlikely. What might have happened, the more boring version, is the police found that and they're like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And just kept that and then gave me back the bag. But the reason I suspect it might be the former is their initial comment that, you know, we don't have it, but we think we'll find it, kind of makes it sound like they had my bag already and were looking through it for something. Now, they might have not known what they're looking for yet. So I don't know. It could go either way. It was just a weird 2 days. Like, not very often, actually never, has one drink like just put me down like that.
There's definitely something in that drink.
I think there had to been.
Yeah.
Like, but it just seems like, you know, that kind of coordinated effort is really far-fetched though. But it makes for a good story. I just really wish I had that card to this day because it was really cool.
That's the nerd in you.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. But yeah, it's probably, unfortunately, the more boring version that they came across it and they're like, yoink.
Right.
Well, this has been such an interesting and educational episode of Tokyo Wave today, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us. Wow. This conversation went all sorts of directions.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure to be here. You know, I had no idea exactly what directions it would go into because like I was telling Aaron earlier, I could have talked on some of these subjects for hours. So it was a little bit hard to like pick and choose what I want to say, but I hope it was entertaining, and I hope you enjoyed having me.
Absolutely. Andrew, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.